Welcome to the Raising the Standard Show. I'm Dr. Andrea Ramirez. We're thrilled that you've joined us today. I have with me as my co-host TBN Salsa, who serves as the Deputy Director of the Faith and Education Coalition and is such a good friend. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to be talking about the impact of education equality on military families. Your dad's a Marine.
Yeah.
I've served in the armed forces.
Yeah.
And, I don't have any kids, so I've never really thought about it from this perspective, but I'm so anxious for the guest that we have today, Christi Ham, and we're going to learn a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. We know military families move a lot, and so standards are so essential to them, and really we're thinking through what makes a difference for these children, what's going to help them have a strong experience and be equipped for whatever God has for them. And so we're excited to think through that with Christi Ham. And, what's one thing, as you think back about your military experience, what's something that stands out that you would want to share?
Well, every place I've always been, the greatest asset that we have is this camaraderie that exists between your whether it's a fellow shipmate or fellow Marine or fellow soldier. You build a bond with those people, and it lasts forever. So I've enjoyed my military experience, and I'm still a reservist.
Yeah.
But that's one of the greatest things I enjoy is the camaraderie that exists between the band of brothers.
Yeah. Well, I think about growing up, and I was sharing with our guests today that I didn't realize how much the Marines impacted my dad's parenting of us until later on I started learning more about the principles of the Marines, and it had such an impact on the way that we were parented. And one of the things that we really gleaned as kids was that we were never to give up, and that oorah spirit of never giving up regardless. And I think that there's such biblical principle behind that God has given us an assignment and that we've got to persevere no matter what. And so I'm excited to dive into what we're talking about today and to introduce you at home to our guest, Christi Ham. Let me tell you a little bit about her because she has quite a contribution to our country, and we're just so grateful for the service that her husband has given, and also that she has given standing by his side for 4 decades. So she's been a military spouse for nearly 4 decades, and she served as the chairwoman for Military Families for High Standards, working to ensure that military children are able to transition to new school settings with continued success and forward progress. Christi, we welcome you. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, we want to dive in because we have a lot of questions. So these are military-connected children. Can you explain to us kind of what that term means?
A military-connected child is the dependent, the child of a service member.
Okay.
It's someone's son or daughter, and the active duty service member is their parent, whether it's a female or a male, and regardless of the branch of service.
And what's so interesting for our viewers at home, what I want you to know is that the likelihood that a military-connected child is in your community is extremely high. So for those of you that are church leaders and pastors, work with youth or children, this show is for you because you can find out about how you are able to minister uniquely to military families and military-connected children. So I have a question about high and consistent standards. Why do they matter for military-connected children, and how can states help influence that?
Military-connected children move between 6 and 9 times in their kindergarten through 12th grade academic career. And every time they move, it's to a new environment, to a new school setting, new friends, new challenges, new social obligations to fitting in. And the last thing that they need is to get to a school setting where they're either asked to redo material that they've already mastered, or to be put in a setting where they're so far out of line with what's being offered that they're in a tutorial setting trying to catch up. So if high and consistent standards could just be available to all students across the nation, not only military children, they could be assured that that next move, that next time that they have to go forward with their service member, their parent, they can be guaranteed that they're going to be met with the kind of material that they can excel with and move forward with in terms of their future college work or careers.
Sure. I think about moving 6 to 9 times. I mean, what kind of, what happens? Like, let's say there's inconsistent standards. How does that impact that child, maybe even psychologically?
Well, it can make them feel like all the time and energy that they spent was for naught because they've worked so hard and now, look, here we are and we're not even in line with what's being offered. On the other side, it can be so frustrating that they say, enough. It just doesn't excite me anymore because I'm always playing catch up. And the same is true on the reverse side. The child who gets to a school setting and realizes that they've already learned the material and the schedule, such as it is, doesn't allow them to take different things, and so they have to repeat coursework that's no longer exciting to them, or they're asked to tutor their fellow students, which is a noble thing to do in terms of service, but it also doesn't seem very efficient in terms of accomplishing material that you need to go to the next level.
Yeah, because you want tutoring to happen when you're learning. In addition to that, you get a tutoring experience, but when it's in place of learning, then that could be problematic. What about states? What can states do to meet the needs of military-connected students?
Well, we've spoken often and encouragingly asking states to remember that what we might invite them to do for military children improves their educational program for every child that they have enrolled in the state. Additionally, the military actively looks at bases and posts and decides which should remain open and which should be closed. And there's been a true testimony to part of that looking to say the stronger the educational community that's available around a military post or installation, there's a big factor then in maintaining that installation because it serves us well. And so if states can understand that and put their energies and their attention toward assuring that that's available, they luck out in the end having perhaps the chance to have those bases and posts stay open to their full economic advantage.
Wow, I've never thought about that connection. That makes complete sense that those would want to stay a little bit longer in service there. So,
I had a question because I know how it can be. You know, you get a set of orders, and you know how you have a very small window of just transition time. And so, explain that process of just when a service member gets his orders, he has to get his family and move to another location, and they're looking for a school, or they're looking for. Can you explain that process? What they're thinking of, and what kind of schools that they ultimately decide on attending?
Well, it almost goes two ways. Some families do that looking to see if they should, in fact, move their family forward with their service member. Perhaps they believe that their best option is to stay where they are, and then the family's distanced between the service member and what's going on in the home. On the other side, they begin to pour over information the school systems put out, the districts put out in terms of course offerings, in terms of testing results, in terms of programs that might be something that they want their child involved with or to continue with. And it becomes a true issue of faith to search it out and believe that the best thing that we can do for our child is to come forward to here and invest ourselves fully in making sure that our family gets what's needed for them in terms of the education of our children.
Wow, so the education quality impacts the child and family, and it also impacts the military because now that service member is like, well, I got to stay here now, and there's almost a transition in work, and maybe he can't even gain another level of expertise or gain some more skills into another position because he's in essence saying, I'm going to stay here for my family, and so it impacts the military too.
Well, yes, and that's another one of those two-sided things. When a soldier moves forward without his family, or a service member moves forward without his family, the community that he moves to loses the benefit of the talents and strengths of the family that could come forward. Right. Volunteerism on the part of the parent, the energy and talents and creativity of the children who could enrich the school system there. Additionally, that service member brings forward those students who could one day be the future recruits for our armed forces. And so you want to keep that positive forward motion of a child learning to become their best and perhaps one day even raise their hand in service to the nation, and be sure that they're prepared to be able to provide the kind of things that the military needs in the decades to come in terms of their training and background.
There's just so much at stake there. I mean, you've got talent, families staying together, because it sounds like, what you spoke earlier is that a serviceman or a soldier could make a decision to separate from their family for a time being to make sure their kids are getting what they need.
Yes.
When they could stay together if the standards were consistent.
Yes.
And high. And so, well, when we think about the military and incorporating education into decision making, how do you see that happening?
I think it's really important that military communities make a firm connectedness with the civilian community that they're involved with, that they're stationed with, and that the conversations are ongoing, and that they're very pointed to not saying do for us,
Right.
but saying together, look what we can do. Our students need this, they deserve this, but at the same time, your children will benefit from the same kinds of things you learn from us. Military students sometimes bring a different culture to an area, just because of the dynamics of how states and communities are set up. There's so much enrichment that can come for that greater community from those military children. And the things that they learn about taking care of children who are either behind or ahead is the same information they can use to help the students that they have enrolled, who, even though they live there all the time, find themselves behind or ahead in their academic coursework.
Well,
It's a
when we think
win-win.
about it is a win-win. I think, and you're helping us to see the two-sidedness of it. When we think about all children, how do you see high and consistent standards impacting education equity on a whole?
I think the best gift you can give to any child, any young learner, is high expectations. The bar needs to be put where they have to reach for it, and you make it exciting and you make it inviting. But we can't water things down or decide to not do a challenge because it's difficult to do, because our scores last time didn't reflect great success. Instead, high consistent standards put everybody on the same page, on the same playing field, working toward the advantage that you met out in the end, when you can say, I'm ready to go to college. Colleges can now take me, they want me, or my career choice is more than willing to recognize that I've done well.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a 5-year-old, and we were just talking about high expectations, and I was explaining to her the reason I have high expectations of her is because I know she can do it. Yeah. And I want her to begin to believe and understand that I wouldn't expect something of her if I didn't wholeheartedly believe that she could rise to do that. And it may take a little bit of extra effort, but at the same time, it's worth it. It will
Absolutely.
be worth it in the end. So, when you think about parents and how they can help, what advice would you have, or what call to action would you have for parents?
Well, military parents I'll speak to first, is that in the point that you made with your one question, parents need to be that child's advocate. They need to be willing to look. If they can't find what they're looking for, they need to be willing to ask. They need to take advantage of the myriad of things that are available out there to begin to educate themselves about a new assignment, about a program of study for a child. Which is not bad advice for any parent. They need to be partners in education. The child is the learner, but the more support that's given to that child, the more understanding that parents have of who their child is, how they learn best, what they're interested in, or what their needs are, all contribute to the success of those children, whether they're Army kids, Navy kids, or the child of the doctor in the local community, or the librarian's son.
That's such rich content, and we thank you for sharing with us and encouraging our viewers, because we have a better understanding now of why it's important, not just for military students, but the total impact that it has on the communities in America. And so we always want you to know what's happening across our country.